All right, can everyone hear me fine? If you can, please type in yes or Y. It's faint. Or mute yourself for a second, Ed. Can you hear me better now? Slightly better. Let's go. Okay, how's that? Is that better? Okay. Not too loud? Okay. All right, let's, Ed, can you come back on?
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Can everybody hear Ed? Second voice? Good. All right, excellent. All right, so we're going to have a smaller group tonight because the momentum is starting for some people. They're taking it. And obviously, I believe that, and I've shared it with you, that you should be taking your classes first. This second, it'll always be here. So we're going to talk a little bit about contracts and understanding, exits in your contract. But what I want to do more than anything is let you drive the session tonight by asking questions. So what questions do we have? What you have a top-notch contract lawyer on the line with you right now. He's definitely one of the best I've ever seen. He is the best I've ever seen. Understands contracts better than anyone that is going to be able to help you out and start develop real opportunity to get involved in an agreement and know that you can walk out if it's not real or it's not in your best interest. And you should take this opportunity to ask questions. If you have questions about agreements, please throw them out there. Okay, Vivian, we can talk about wholesale. Is there one in particular? Can you get more specific? I mean, at the end of the day, the contract for wholesale is simply a real estate offer to purchase contract with the most important thing, obviously, in a wholesale is assignability. We put that in every contract. Contract has to be assignable. You'd have your standard clauses, Vivian. Your inspection clause, your financing clause, the one we shared. Remember, we talked about finance clause. But there has to be an assignment clause. That's very important, and we want to make sure that we're transparent in that. That doesn't need to be hidden or anything. That would be in the Appendix A or in the and or assigned when we sign the contract. Sam Musa and or assigned. We don't really need to put Sam Musa and or assigned. We can put Sam Musa and then the Appendix A, which is additional clauses that we attach to the contract. Just simply that this contract is assignable. The sound is bad. So Vivian, what is it that you want to, maybe something specific you want to ask? Can everyone hear me okay? Type in yes if you can hear me okay. Okay, Brandon, that's good. That might be because there's two of us on the line.
So let me try to turn my microphone off until I have to, and then you can talk a bit and see if it's any better.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'm turning it off now. All right.
Is that better right now? Can you hear me okay? So just saying about contracts and agreements concerning wholesale. And any really any contract, we want to make sure that we have specific clauses in there. There's some standard ones that come with the contract. We have a clause for inspection, clause for insurability, clause for financing. Obviously, we need the clause for assignability. So, Vivian, that's probably the biggest and best and most important thing is obviously assignability. Without that clause, there can be just some dispute on when you try to assign it, and we want to be transparent with people. We want to let them know that the assignability clause is there. We're not hiding it. We want them to see that. So that's probably the most important clause. Obviously, assignability is not an exit clause, so you need your additional clauses in there for sure. And as I've talked to a few people just this week about, making sure that a lawyer reviews your contract, that would be, always the best thing to do, especially when you're first getting things going. Can we specify the number of days for the assignment? No, Vivian, you don't need to do that. For that, the contract would be assignable for its life. There isn't really a reason to put a date on that. That's going to be, it's assignable until we take possession. Obviously, once we take possession, the contract's fulfilled and we can't assign it. As far as I know, Ed, do you want to add anything to this?
Okay, I think I'm back in there. In connection with the assignment, yeah, I mean, if you include a certain number of days in there, all you're doing is limiting your right to assignment, right? So what you're doing, so the general rule under contract law, and this would apply to any type of contract, is that a contracting party is permitted to assign their right.
Okay, I think we lost Ed.
Okay, so I'm back. So the general rule is that a party can assign their rights in a contract. Okay, so even if a contract is silent on assignment, the general rule is you can assign your rights. What you want to make sure that you include, though, in the assignment provision is that you assign both your rights and obligations. Although the general rule is that you can assign your rights, you may still be on the hook for any obligations associated with the agreement. So you want to make sure that you're assigning both your rights and your obligations such that the assignor, the party who's assigning the contract, is released from any obligations in connection with the contract. In response to Vivian's questions about specifying the number of days, I think I touched on this before. I don't know whether it was before or after I cut out. But you wouldn't want to do that, right? What you want to have is an agreement that you can assign, period. Assign in respect of both rights and obligations. If you set a certain number of days, all you're doing is you're limiting yourself. If there isn't a certain number of days set, then the agreement can be assigned up until the last second before it's administered, right? So I wouldn't do that. Are traditional lenders okay with and/or assigns clause? I mean, a lender is going to be lending to a specific individual, whether it's an assignor or an assignee, right? And they're going to do their credit check and their due diligence on the individual who's seeking the credit, whether it's assignor or an assignee. So, I mean, in my practice, they're fine with it. They frankly are pretty indifferent to it. What they're concerned about is the credit worthiness of the person who's making the application. And then there is the strongest exit clause. I mean, listen, you can, in terms of contract law, the general rule, this is separate and apart from assignment, but the general rule is the parties can agree to anything they want. All right, there's some exceptions on the extremes of that rule, but the general rule is the parties can agree to anything they want. In the real estate context, I found that one of the strongest exit clauses is the home inspection, right? And it's not a simple sort of standard home inspection clause. I think what you want to include in there is that the inspection has to be, the results of the inspection have to be satisfactory to the purchaser in their sole discretion, and this provision, separate and apart from the assignment provision, usually almost always is limited by a certain number of days. But if you set out there that the discretion is to be exercised solely by the purchaser, then you've got a pretty good exit clause in there up until the date that the provision, the inspection provision expires. And that one, for that provision, you're almost always going to have a vendor who insists on some period of days, some number of days before closing. Otherwise, all the vendor is really doing is granting the prospective purchaser an option, right? Because up until the date of closing, they can then assert that they're not satisfied with some inspection, and most vendors aren't going to be agreeable to that, and I think that's reasonable. That's a reasonable position as a vendor to take. I don't know if there are any other questions.
Yep, let me just jump back in and you can just move. Let's read this. Where am I? I am
going. So if you want you want to take this, Heis, or you want me to?
No, you take it. Just read it up.
Okay. So yeah, sure. So what Vivian is, and I'll read the question, I guess. So where I am going to this question is, if I am planning to do a wholesale deal and I'm not planning to buy the property, can I put a clause to say I can assign the contract in a 3 weeks time frame? Otherwise, I can exit. I think you mean, it says exist, but I think you mean exit. So the answer to that question is yes. Again, going back to what I said a couple of minutes ago, the general rule under contract law is 2 or more independent contracting parties can agree to anything they want to agree. So from a purely legal perspective, strictly speaking, the answer to your question is yes. From a practical perspective, the answer is, in all likelihood, no, practically speaking, because what you're talking about, Vivian, there is really an option, right? What you're asking the vendor for is an option for, I think you say 3 weeks in there. Yes, can I assign the contract in a 3 weeks time? Yes, what you're asking for is an option, a right to purchase the property and then assign it within a 3 week period, failing which then the agreement comes to an end. Can you do that from a legal perspective? Absolutely. Nothing to prevent you, period. I guess the most difficult part from my experience would be getting a vendor to agree to that, because what you're asking the vendor to do from a practical perspective is take the property off the market for 3 weeks, right? Because you've got a right, to the extent that you can find somebody to assign it to in that 3 week period, to sell. So you're asking them to take the property off the market for 3 weeks. I mean, if I'm acting for a vendor in a situation like that, I would strongly recommend against it, or to the extent that the vendor was agreeable, we would ask for a large non-refundable deposit, which would compensate the vendor for keeping the property off the market for whatever period of time this quote-unquote option exists.
I'm just going to jump in.
Sure, I'll turn my mic off.
Yeah. We write the contract this way, Vivian, it becomes, as Ed said, it becomes a option contract, and that's not what we want, right? We're just writing a simple offer to purchase contract with the ability to assign it. So we don't really want the assignability to be an exit for us. That's not what we're looking for. We want the flexibility of the assignability, but the exit is going to exist in, as Ed had mentioned, things like inspection, financing would be another one, suitable financing, sole discretion of the buyer, also insurability. These are the things that are really going to provide exits for us. When we start writing the contract, as Ed had said, just like he said, the option to assign it, we can't assign it, we exit, then it does turn into an option contract. Really, we're just really getting an option. In that case, it's going to trigger some questions, and maybe someone's going to ask for money to go to the market. We really don't want to write it that way. Assignability is not just for wholesale. Assignability is for us to be able to assign it to a corporation, to a partner, to an end user. We want all that flexibility. Language is definitely important in our contract. We want to make sure it's appropriate and that it leads us down the right questions and complaints on what are we doing with this property. So absolutely want to be able to wholesale, but just want to make sure that we're ready to contract as though it was a simple offer to purchase contract that we were looking to purchase ultimately. Okay? Does that make sense, Vivian? Is that clear? Anything else you want to add or any questions you want to further? And please, this is open floor for anybody who has questions about contracts or agreements or clauses. Who's my lawyer, my contract lawyer and corporate lawyer. You know what, Ed? Is it okay if you learn about yourself and who you're with? Is that okay?
Sorry, you cut out there. Say that again, please.
Just hoping that you could just a little bit of yourself, what law you practice and what you do. Where you're from?
Sure. Sure. I'm just reading something from Emmanuel. So in other terms, we can use the clause that says, purchase conditional to finding the financing satisfied, and if we have not found any buyer by the end of the period, we can walk away. Well, yeah, I mean, this is in response to Emmanuel's question. I mean, the way that you've set it up, Emmanuel, I mean, the answer would be no, right? I mean, you can't insert a condition in respect of financing, and then which condition would say that this purchase is conditional upon the buyer securing financing satisfactory to the buyer, and the vendor will usually add after that the phrase that I just set out, acting reasonably. I mean, from a practical perspective, if you had a provision like that and you weren't able to find an assignee and then you tried to exit the contract, from a practical perspective, you may be able to walk. From a strictly speaking legal perspective, though, the financing provision allows the prospective purchaser, depending on the wording of the financing provision. I mean, one can't speak simply of financing provisions or assignment provisions or provisions in respect of inspections. I mean, there's no cookie cutter in any of these types of provisions. It all really depends on the wording, right? But anyways, if there's a financing provision that's worded similar to what Emmanuel has set out on the screen here, and like I said, the vendor would normally include acting reasonably in connection with the purchaser's right to exercise discretion related to financing, you wouldn't be able to, from a legal perspective, exercise your rights under that provision by walking away from the contract because you hadn't found an assignee. I mean, it's just, from a practical perspective, maybe, but from a legal perspective, no. Just back to what Haitham was mentioning. So I've been practicing almost 15 years, almost exclusively in the area of business law in London at a law firm called Siskins. My practice is, and virtually all business lawyers' practices that practice exclusively in that area revolves largely around contract drafting, contract preparation, contract amendment, contract review, whether those contracts are purchase and sale agreements, partnership agreements, acquisition agreements, shareholder agreements, lease agreements. There are a myriad different types of agreements without sort of common names. But that's what I do in the main in my practice.
Also the corporate end, just that you
Sure. So a lot of what we do, a lot of what business lawyers do is revolves around contracts. But some of our practice, a good part of our practice is, and business lawyers in the past used to be called corporate lawyers because much of our practice dealt with corporations, whether in the context of incorporating a company or a group of companies, whether in the context of structuring a company or group of companies, whether in the context of preparing agreements in respect of companies, whether they're shareholder agreements or loan agreements or anything of that nature, whether they're new incorporations, whether they're corporations that have existed for some period of time and we're reorganizing the capital of that corporation, whether it's in the context of some sort of estate planning where there's an exit plan by one of the majority shareholder in the corporation, anything related to incorporations from their inception, from the date of filing articles of incorporation, bringing a corporation to existence, through its life cycle, which sometimes can be and often is several years, decades, even beyond that, to its final wind-up or dissolution. Heis, I'll turn off my microphone in a second because I want people to be able to hear clearly. But I just want to respond quickly to Anne-Marie's question here. Is there a difference on financing clause in Quebec? So I should be clear about this. I am not licensed to practice in Quebec, and most lawyers that aren't trained in the civil law system, which is what the Quebec law system which is how the Quebec law system is characterized, would say the same thing. Quebec just has a completely different system. So whereas Ontario laws are to a certain extent different than other provincial laws, they're relatively similar, and they're all grounded in something called the common law system. Quebec just has a different system. So I can't give any advice, information, or make any comment on Quebec law. I don't know. Is the simplest answer, I guess.
Okay. So, Emmanuel, so in the other terms we can use clause. Okay, so as Ed had said and is trying to articulate is that we're not using these other clauses to allow us to, exit a contract because we can't assign. We want the standard exit clauses to allow us to do proper due diligence, and or when we assign that contract, we want the assignee, the person, the end user or investor, to be able to be protected too, right? So in those clauses exists the ability for the person that we assign it to exit the contract if it doesn't fulfill certain things like inspection, like insurability. These things are important for that end user. So we want those clauses, and we're not trying to, and I want to press upon you this, we're not trying to hold up a property for someone. We're trying to control the property with the intention of assignability, yes, but in assignability and in controlling that property, there has to be a reason for us to do that, right? We want to be able to control the property to see if it fulfills our needs and or the needs of an assigned purchaser, right? So it's not just to hold up the property, right? We have to have a reason for that. It's a good deal, or apparently looks like a good deal, right? There's an opportunity there because it fulfills some need of an end user that we have in mind. This is why it's great for us to first get buyers before we get properties that we want to assign, because when you assign a property, relisting the property at a discount, which you can do, there's nothing wrong with that. You got to remember that the properties that we're dealing with, especially in the assignment, typically are distressed properties or properties with a problem. And I want to press upon you this also to remind everybody, we don't get paid unless we solve a problem. So what problem are we solving for that seller, right? What is it? Is it a property that's not producing any income? Is it a property that can't be sold in the retail market because it's not in that condition? We should only expect to make money in this business and in any business, as far as I'm concerned, if we're solving a problem for someone. So in the scope of real estate, that goes way beyond, I've just mentioned a couple, but we're talking about divorce, job loss, moving for a job. They want to own, and they're in a rental state, and they need some assistance in transferring themselves, putting themselves in a position to be able to purchase it, i.e., rent to own. So I want to keep that in mind with everybody. Remember, you have to solve a problem for someone. Don't expect to make money in any business. If you're not fulfilling something, you're not fixing something for someone. Okay, so these questions, when you're asking these questions, which please can you continue that and never feel like you can't ask a question, because they're all important. We're all learning here together, and I want this forum to be that. From what position is that question coming from? What are we looking at or doing to do that? This is why it's excellent to get out there, do things, and when you follow the process that we want, which is one of them and very important, is to have your lawyer, review these contracts, and have them review it to ensure that you have legal advice telling you, look, this is your exposure. This is what this means. They don't, if they don't like something you have in your contract, you need to make sure that you're covered. In this process, you're gonna learn quite a bit more than anything else. Practical experience. It's gonna serve you by actually going out and doing this stuff and getting involved and using professionals. And we want to use lawyers and accountants and realtors and mortgage brokers when it's necessary and important for us to do that to protect ourselves. So when it comes to those contracts, we definitely want to be able to, make sure that those exit clauses or clauses in general service us and both parties, and that we're in a position what our intention is to see if we have a deal. And if we don't, we don't. Then we're out. If we do, then let's make something happen. Okay, in other terms, list the clauses that will best keep us safe. No obligation, not oblige us to buy the property in case we do not find a buyer in 3 weeks. 1 month time frame. I'm in Quebec, so I will definitely have my lawyer review the contract before we head nowhere. Okay, so Emmanuel, we spoke actually earlier or we emailed back and forth earlier this week. I think that is anybody looking for a Quebec lawyer? Is anybody actually looking for a Quebec lawyer? Okay, good. So Emmanuel,
So, Heis, I don't know
are
if
you
you
still
know,
looking for somebody?
if you know one. It looks like she has one. Um, okay, it looks like that. I was going to say I could refer somebody, but it looks like they all have one.
That's excellent then. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were employing the right people on our team. So that's great that you have a lawyer. Still open to referral. Okay, and if there's a referral you want to provide, you can have one.
Yeah, I mean, I can. I mean, I really want to turn my mind to it before I just blurt out a name. So maybe what I'll do is throughout the call, if I come up with a name, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I can let you know later on, Heis, and you can post it to the group somehow, I guess, right? Looks like Vivian
Yeah, we'll
doesn't
do that.
have. Yeah, it looks like Vivian doesn't have one. So
Just
if one comes to mind, there was somebody I was dealing with recently, but their name just doesn't come to mind. I've got to think about it. If it comes to mind, I'll let you know now. If not, I'll let you know later, and you can let the group know.
that's good. Let's do that. And we want to definitely alert them that they'll receive some calls too, right? So it might be a good idea that you let me know and let them know that some people might be calling them. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Good. All right. So let's talk about those clauses. So here's some clauses, and again, right? They need to be reviewed. So let me see if I can find those clauses. Okay. Okay. Let me bring that up. Just give me 1 second. Okay, that's opening up. Give me 1 second, and then we can go through them, okay? Please keep going with your questions. Write down any questions. We can continue with that for sure while I do this. There we go. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to help somebody get in the room. Okay. Okay. Um, Sam, the realtor who sent me the lead for the property, suggests that I come check the property before making an offer that is too low and takes into consideration the estimated level of repairs needed. I already made an offer that he showed to the owner, but apparently the owner says it's too little. It's too low. Okay. How would you answer that? Would you go to the contractor to check out the place and possibly revise your offer or maintain your initial offer? Okay, good question. So in this question, if the property's distressed like that, obviously we can ask the seller, and even the realtor themselves, what would it take to get it to a retail level, and what would be the after repair value? Does that make sense to everybody? So let's say that the property is worth it's worth $100,000 as it sits, um, but we are not sure. Is that real? Do we, is that the number we should be offering? Let's look at the seller says, I want 130,000. We say, great. What do you need for repairs to get it to a retail level? And the realtor can also speak to this. The realtor says you need $20,000 to get it to retail level, and the retail level now, if you fix everything up, this property's worth 150, right? 150,000. So if they tell us it's worth 150 and 20,000 is the cost of repair, then we could estimate that the current value is 130,000. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, that doesn't mean we're going to pay 130,000 for it. We're going to pay less for it, and we justify that by saying, look, I need to put money into this property before I can produce any kind of profit from it. And you should never be concerned or worried about telling people that you're making a profit. This is important. So more than anything, Emmanuel and everybody else, right? If you have a realtor representing it, they've done. We make the assumption that they've done some work on it in the sense of what it would take to fix it up, because they're justifying their price based on that. But according to the pics he sent me, the bathroom and kitchen are okay, but not outstanding. I would think the investor buyer would appreciate having at least 20-25K to make some improvements. So Emmanuel, let's ask them what it would cost. Ask them, and we want to be fair and we want to be transparent. How do you come up with that price? So us asking them that saying, look, what does it take to repair this place? What does it need for repairs? What's the cost of repairs to get this property to a retail level? And considering they're a realtor, what is it worth after it's fixed up? That's really where we want to go with that, Emmanuel. Okay, does that make sense? Because after we find out that the property, is that clear to everybody? Is anybody confused about that? Considering how we come up with those prices? If you are, please let me know. Anybody? Not clear? Of what I'm saying right now? It's all right. Okay, look. Let me show you what I mean. Okay. Let's see if this will work here for me. All right, good. All right. Let's say, somebody says, hey, this property is worth. I'm selling it for. Oh, that's not very good. I'm selling it for 100K. Okay, I'm selling it for 100K. And you say, okay, you're selling it for 100K. How much repairs does this property need? And they say, well, the repairs on this property is 20K. Okay, and we say, okay, it's 20K. Okay, I really need to get a new stylus. Okay, it's 20K. So we say, okay, it's 20K, and what's the after repair value of this property? And because, Emmanuel, you're telling me there's a realtor, right? There's a realtor dealing with this property with you, right? Is that correct, Emmanuel? Yeah, okay. So the realtor should know, what the after repair value of this is, right? Now, if they tell us that the property, needs 20,000 in repairs, and they're selling it for 100, and then we say to the realtor, well, what is the after repair value? You would know, right? What's this property worth after we fix it up? And the realtor should come back, right, with a a price in the 120,000, right? Now, here's the thing. That's much better. 120,000 for the the retail, the after repair value. Now, if someone comes to you with that, the problem is that the house is too big for its owner, hence the motivation to sell, but does not mean that the repairs are needed according to the realtor. So, Emmanuel, it needs no repairs? It doesn't need any repairs at all, according to the realtor. Not to you. Okay. So Emmanuel, the property then is he's selling it to you for retail, and the motivation for this seller is the house is too big for them. Is it too expensive for them? Based on the pics, it seems functional but not great. House is too big. Too much maintenance on the house. Okay. And what's the it was built to host 8 to 10 people, disabled and old. That's what this property's built for. So it's got a ramp and access, perfect for big family. Yeah. So Emmanuel, I want you to actually connect with somebody that might be able to use that property. That that might be able to do something with that property. I'll give you his name. Yeah, perfect for retirement home. Sounds like it. It sounds like it. So yeah, okay. So I'll give you that name, Emmanuel. Just email me at the end of the call, and I'll email you back with the name, okay? And we'll see if we can do something. Now he's in Ontario. He works with people that actually not retired. We're gonna see, Emmanuel. They're not retired, but they're people that he works with the ministry that he houses for them. And it could be he's actually looking for partners. And I was hoping he'd be on the call. He must be at the other the momentum, but I wanted him to come on, explain what he's doing, and possibly if people were interested, he's got something really interesting. I think that might be good for partnership. I suggested that to him, so he's excited to hear that. But we'll deal with that next week, and or Emmanuel, I'll give you his name earlier than that, okay? Because you have something that you're working on. Okay, so let's go back to this. 100K, 100K, 20K in 20K in repairs. ARV is 120. Now, if this is true, if this is actually true, right? This is an actual true statement. Then it's not insane for us to say to them, well, look, the property, the property's 100,000 needs 20,000 in repairs. You can't expect me to buy the house for 100,000 because I need to put $20,000 into it. There's no benefit to me, right? If the seller wants to sell it at retail, then the seller should put the 20,000 in himself or herself, and they can sell it for 120. But to expect a buyer to buy something and then put more money into it and not gain something from that further investment, I think is an unrealistic assumption. Now, that being said, he might turn around and say to us, well, that's what we want, and this is the way it is. And we say, well, no problem. Don't get upset. Don't get angry. Just say thank you. This is something that maybe down the line, if something changes, we can get involved in. I don't want you to get upset or angry or with anybody or tell people they have to do something a particular way. We're here to provide options for people based on their needs. This individual that you have right now, Emmanuel, it's simply that the house is too big. I think there's more to that. I think it's more than the house is too big. I think the cost of maintaining the house might play a role in this situation too. And I don't know, but I assume that's part. So it's partly money too, right? And because this property is built the way it is, this is a unique property in a retail market, in a simple, selling a house and expecting, a single family to move into this home is unlikely. So that's a benefit to us. There's an opportunity there. So we might in this situation just simply say, look, at this point, if the price is no good, we can maybe revisit it down the road. Let me know if something changes for you. That being said, I don't know what price you provided to them. Is it a realistic price? Is it something that is fair for both parties? But just so we understand, fair means that we make money too. Does everybody understand that? It's okay for us to okay. So market value is 267. Where'd they get that number? I'm curious. For such a unique property. That's interesting to me. You offered 179. Okay, it's not a massive discount. You know, I asked for comps from the realtor. Good, good. Did they provide comps for you? He sent me 6 comps, but with only one house that's sold. Okay, that's important. I mean, if it only sold, then the other comps are weaker in that position of not being sold. Just posting properties is not providing market value. Purchases are what create that market value. The other thing, Emmanuel, is I'm wondering, uh, you know, this particular property, does he have a mortgage on it? Okay, and does he need all the money from this mortgage? Does he need a portion? Does he need to sell it outright? Do you know any of that information? It's a secret? Is that what that means? Realtor does not want to share. Okay, so Emmanuel, just say to the realtor, look, the more you can tell me, the more I can help you, right? I mean, if there's something we can work out, I probably, possibly could get a creative financing method that would get me closer to his price, you know? No, he wouldn't get in trouble, Emmanuel. He just asks the realtor if it's okay for him to divulge that. He told you that he would get in trouble? Okay. So again, I want to repeat this. We're transparent, right? Ethically, he's not doing anything wrong unless he does it without the permission, or letting, you got to let the seller know that you're sharing this information and the reason why. So, which helps the seller. But there's no ethical dilemma with sharing that information. If the seller knows, like he's got to go to the seller and say, look, this buyer has offered possibly a solution, but he needs to know if you have a mortgage, are you comfortable with me sharing those details? If the seller says yes, then no problem. If the seller says no, then yes, he would be violating something ethically if he doesn't. Is the realtor representing the seller? Good question. Okay, good. All right. So yes. So Emmanuel, let's ask the seller, ask the realtor to ask the seller. Can we do that? Can we do that? Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask Emmanuel, send me the email and we'll continue this conversation offline, okay? Does anybody have any questions about what I just shared with Emmanuel and with the group about, you know, understanding what the value of a property is, right? You know, when people even this above what I'm showing you here, I want you to understand. If somebody says to you this number, whatever number they give you simply go backwards. You say, well, look, the first question we always want to ask is, what repairs are needed? What's how much does it need to repair? Well, they say, well, it needs, 50, 50K, needs 50K. Okay, and we say, oh, needs 50K. Okay, no problem. Okay, just back that up. We say 50K. Hold on. Okay, so if they say to us, that's beautiful. Look at that. 50K. What do we say to them? They say to us, just asking their parents, who cares what the list price is? Just say 50K. What's the next question? They say you need 50K to fix this property to get it up to retail value. What's the next question? We ask them. Who can tell me? Exactly. What is the ARV? Why are we asking what is the ARV? Why are we asking that question? Determine the profit? Yeah, but also more importantly, Brandon, it's to determine simply, okay, let me do this. It's simply to determine, you know, if it's 50K, we're trying to find out real value, current value, market value. So if they say 50K and the guy says, and I say, well, what's the after repair value? What's the retail value of this property? If I fixed everything up, what's it worth? He says, well, it's worth 275K. And I say, great. What do? I take 50,000 off of 275, which would mean its current market value. The way it sits is 225, right? I can, 225 because I take the 50K as repairs. But 225, although a market value, or one could argue is a market value, that's not the value that we're going to pay or anybody should pay, because if they have to provide the 50K, they can't be expected, to pay 225 because there's no upside for the seller. Sorry, for the buyer, right? At least not for us. So we would say to them, look, if you're expecting me to pay, say he said he wanted 220. You're trying to list the price for 220. You're saying to me 50 grand. You're telling me to buy this help, put 50 grand in, and I'll make $5,000 in equity, extra money. That's doesn't seem right to us. So we can't do this, but we can maybe do, based on that, we can do 178, 237. How about that? Let's work on that. There has to be a reason for us to invest the money. As a rule, general rule, I like in that rehab scenario I put in $1, I make $2. Okay, which is almost what this is. I put in $1, I put in 50 grand into a property. I would want to make 100,000, in value over here. Now it's not quite, it's just under 100,000. This price versus this price, right? But that's kind of where we want to be in range of, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Good. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to go through these. Last thing we're going to do, we're going to wrap up, but while I still have Ed, I want to walk through these clauses. Okay, when you put a property under contract.
Okay, so yeah, I was just turning the mic back on. So it would depend on the terms of the agreement, right? So as an example, one method of exercising due diligence is the inspection, right? So you'd have a provision in the agreement that says something along the lines of this offer is conditional on an inspection being undertaken, which inspection is satisfactory in the purchaser's sole discretion, right? Something along those lines. And to the extent that you have something like that, and to the extent that you say here you found that the property was worth less, so what I'm presuming is, and I'm presuming you mean by that is as a result of the inspection or some other element of due diligence, you determined that the property had some deficiency or required some remediation or something like that. Then where you're at is, from a contractual perspective, is you are afforded a right to terminate the contract, right? The contract isn't satisfied, a contract isn't executable, a contract isn't binding if a condition hasn't been satisfied, and you've got a due diligence provision, an inspection condition, whatever it is, right? And at that point, what parties often do is enter into, to the extent that the results of the due diligence are bona fide, right? To the extent that you can actually point to something that renders the value of the property something less than you had initially anticipated, the parties often enter into negotiations for some sort of reduction or abatement in the price. You can certainly do that. And the leverage that you have as a prospective purchaser is the ability to walk away, right? That's your leverage, your ability to walk away. And you can exercise that leverage to not to compel the vendor to offer the property at a lower price, but certainly to try to negotiate a lower price.
This can be justified by simply saying, look, the price that we have here currently is 300,000. After due diligence and the inspection, we've realized that this particular, there's the wiring is knob and tube. We need to replace the wiring. The wiring is going to cost to be replaced and up to code. It's going to cost, $10,000. We'd like the $10,000, reduced from the price. Also, we can ask somebody to an extension, in the sense of, so let's say that we have a property and we're getting financing and financing is not coming through for us. We're doing creative financing. We say, look, Mr. Smith, the financing is a challenge for us right now. We're working on it. Uh, we believe that we can wrap it up. It's being a little bit delayed. We'd like to extend it 14 days or 7 days. Now, obviously, the seller can say no to you, right? And if you haven't fulfilled the contract, then the contract can be terminated if you can't meet that required date on your contract. But you got to remember the seller's selling, right? He wants to sell. So this is something that I've learned with contracts is when you put a contract together with people, what typically happens or the sentiment changes is that, before the contract you had problems, I had problems. So my financing problems are your problems. But once you put a contract together, the seller and the buyer's problems become the same problems because they're both, and the intention is to purchase and for the buyer and for the seller to sell. So we can't underestimate the motivation behind that. And if we can motivate people solving a problem, absolutely, that would be something that typically, not always, that they're more flexible on things like that. So, the biggest thing, the best thing I can always tell you again is to be transparent. Be transparent with your clauses, be transparent with your intentions, be transparent that how you make money in this deal. It's okay to tell people that you profit and how you profit. Um, that's the best thing you can do, absolutely. So people know, where you're coming from, right? And believe me, it establishes a sense of trust because you're being direct and honest with, how you're going to participate in this deal. So please, I think it's very important. It's totally up to you how you move forward with these things. But in my experience and experience of the people that have coached and mentored me, that that's the advice I've been given. It served me well. So in life, in life, my whole life. But anyways, let's do this. Does that work? Does that answer your question, Justin? Okay, good. All right, so let's just walk through these clauses real quick. Okay, so here we go. Let me share, and Ed, you can jump in here and talk about these clauses. So and remember, Ed's a lawyer, and he's going to explain from the buyer and the seller's perspective what that clauses mean. If he's on the buying side of it, he's going to want a different perspective than the selling side. He's already expressed that, and I think it's important to understand how important proper representation is. So if anybody's interested in Ed's contact information, does anybody would have Ed's contact information? He creates corporations. He also does the contract creation, and he's excellent at what he does. So, Ed, if you're comfortable with that, could you please put in your information, the information you'd like to use, maybe an email or something, so they can reach out to you? That's okay.
Um, sure. I mean, I can try. I don't know that
Oh, you can use it here.
to be to be honest, know how to. Let
Okay,
me see.
and then
Okay, I've got it. I'm just going to put in a number for now,
okay,
and that should be good.
I can put something in if you want. We can probably find something.
No, I figured it out. I'll just
Okay,
put a number in, and
okay, that sounds good.
they're welcome to call me at any time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thanks. Let me Give me 1 second. Try to indoctrinate. So we're not gonna. Okay. So let's run down these clauses real quick. Promised. So let's let's do this. Okay. So here's the first clause. Sign second. Press. Purchaser has the right to assign his or her offer prior to closing any person, corporation, at the purchaser's sole discretion upon assignment. Assignees. Okay, let's look at this first clause. Okay, so the purchaser has the right to assign his or her interest in this offer prior to closing to any person, corporation, or entity at purchaser's sole discretion. Upon assignment, the assignee assumes all the privileges and responsibilities of the contract. Everybody see that the assignment clause? Ed, is there anything you want to add to this? Is this clause? Do you see any challenges with this particular clause?
So I can't see it. Hyson, if you could read it to me, it's cut off the edge of my screen there. So just read it again, and I'll listen to what you're saying.
Okay. So purchaser has the right to assign his or her interest in this offer prior to closing to any person, corporation, or entity at purchaser's discretion. Upon assignment, the assignee assumes all of the privileges and responsibilities of this contract.
Yeah, I mean, I think that works um, because of the wording at the end there. It assumes all privileges and
The assumption
responsibilities.
of responsibilities. Yeah, yeah, right, right, right.
I
So,
think I think
so
just out of an abundance of caution, what I might include is and the exact wording doesn't necessarily matter. The exact wording doesn't. The sentiment does. The meaning does. But just something along the lines of, and all parties here to, or the vendor agrees, something that sets out that the not only will the assignee assume all the privileges and responsibilities, but that the assignor, the person who signed the actual agreement, the person who's assigning, is released from all responsibilities, liabilities,
obligations.
obligations, something along that. I mean, you
So,
probably get that from what you've
right,
got there already, but it's just
right, right, right. Just to be redundant, a little bit of redundancy is never bad in the agreement, just so there's clarity, correct?
yeah, it just avoids ambiguity and multiple
Yeah, yeah,
interpretations.
yeah. And I think the important thing to remember is, and this is why contracts are so important, is the writer of the contract has the weakest position in dispute. In other words, if there's ambiguity or there's some confusion on the way that's written, um, they always side with the person that's pretty much side with the person that's disputing that agreement. If there is some problem with the actual clause itself or the writing of it. So the writing of it, because you are the writer of it, you're the one writing the contract. There's more pressure on you to make sure that it's okay. So this is what I'd like to do at this point. I'm only going to take this contract, this particular clause on, excuse me, this particular clause on because of the time. And what we'll do is we'll pick up this conversation of clauses and we'll run through those clauses. What I'll do is I'll have Ed review all those clauses once again for us, and I will share them with you all next week. And we can continue the conversation of clauses as we go to our next Tuesday's call. What I want to do right now is thank everybody for coming. And the last thing, just before we go, any questions that you feel like you need to get answered now? Anybody? We all good? If you're good, type in yes. Good. Excellent. I want to thank Ed Adnan for sharing his time with us. Adnan is we're working on a schedule, hoping um, that Adnan can share with us one call a month to give us that advice, that insight, that contract insight, that legal insight that really helps our business. Um, and thank you everybody, and I'm sure everyone appreciates your time. Ed, thank you very much, Adnan, for sharing your time. I know that. Your time is important to like everybody talks about the contracts and so it's an insight into agreements and contracts. Sorry, Ed, did you want to say something?
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I'm happy to answer any questions and maybe reconvene at some later time and get through some of these other provisions as well. And best of luck to
Yeah.
everybody that was on the call too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Ed. Okay. So again, we're gonna go just with this clause. We'll go with the continuing clauses. I'll get Ed to vet those clauses so we can talk about it next week, and hopefully he can join us next month for an hour of his time and share with us some more insight about contracts and agreements. Emmanuel, send me an email. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Is there anybody else that needs anything before we wrap up? We good? We good? Say yes. Good, 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 good. Glad you can make it. Excellent. Glad you can make it. Everyone have a great rest of the week. And if you need anything, reach out and keep hunting. Okay? Thank you very much.